on Sunday morning, July 12th, very, very hot and humid day. The nation was in the midst of a terrible heat wave at the time. Of course, these guys are all walking around in wool uniforms, carrying 40-pound packs with them, and it's 90-some degrees for like 18, 19 straight days. Jacob Lauman, the brigadier general, who was in charge of their brigade, must have saw something that day on July 12th. He's never explained himself, so we don't know what it was he saw. But about 9:15 in the morning on July 12th, he inexplicably ordered 3 companies of men out of the 53rd. Not just random, but they were all 3 companies out of the 53rd. He told them to get into formation and charge across the field into the enemy line. Now they weren't unaided, unsupported, and they were just going to go by themselves. Now remember, a company is 100 men each. At this point in the war, those 3 companies added up to 255 men. So these 255 men, they know they're going into a suicide mission, because they know once they get close enough, you know, thousands of men are going to start shooting at them from the other side. And what is going to be the objective if they get to the other side? You know, what are they going to do? Tell 26,000 men to drop their guns? You know, there's only 255 of them. But they're soldiers. Soldiers do what soldiers are told to do. So they got in formation. Sergeant George Poundstone took this flag, he got in front of them. They started marching across that field. There was about 500 yards of no man's land between the 2 lines. They got close to halfway across the field when somebody on the other side yelled fire. All kinds of pieces of artillery, which are cannon, and thousands of infantrymen were already sitting there with their guns aimed and ready to pull the trigger. When somebody yelled fire, immediately almost half of the 53rd, those 3 companies of the 53rd were wiped out. And then they got a few shots off, but they realized we can't just stay here. They regrouped, they reformed formation, and they started marching forward a second time. They went 2 or 3 more minutes. The hail of bullet coming after them was so severe that again, they got stopped. Some of them got down on their hands and knees to shoot back. Some laid on their bellies to shoot back. They were trying to make themselves as small of a target as they could. But they were just being wiped out. And again, the longer they stood there, the more that the enemy could hone in their aim on that small group of men. So they got up again. They went forward a 3rd time. Regimental history says on the 3rd attempt, they got remarkably close to the breastworks of the enemy. That's a quote. Remarkably close to the breastwork of the enemy. I don't know what that means. Was it 50 yards? Was it 10 yards? Whoever wrote the regimental history was obviously very impressed that they got remarkably close, but they didn't give a number. At this point, they got stopped. They couldn't go any further. Those that could turned and headed back to the Union lines. Some walked, some crawled, some ran, but they made their way back. 255 men from LaSalle County made that charge. 66 came back. Most of that 66 was wounded one way or another. They said the majority of them died in the next few days from their wounds. That means there were 189 men laying on that battlefield. They were stretched out in that 500 yards of no man's land. 189 men. And the siege of Jackson didn't stop. Because for the whole rest of that day, this happened at 9:15 in the morning, the whole rest of that day the siege continued. We consistently bombarding the city of Jackson. And they laid there in that heat all day, no help. Nighttime came, Sunday night, July 12th. Nighttime came, the guns stopped, no help for the men came. Most of them were too close to the enemy, they couldn't get there without being picked off. So they laid there. Monday morning, July 13th, sun comes up, the bombardment of the city continues again. Those 189 dead and wounded are still laying on that battlefield. And again, nighttime comes, no help came. Monday night, July 13th, one of the soldiers wrote in his diary from the Orphan Brigade out of Paducah that no one on either side of the line got any sleep that night because of the horrible cries and moans coming off that field. Men were begging to be killed. Still no help. Tuesday, July 14th, sun comes up, still 90-some degree heat, and these guys are laying out there. The stench is starting to really bother the guys on the Confederate line because they're closer to most of the dead and wounded. And a lot of these wounded there's just not much left of the body. I know it's kind of gross to get into the details of it, but when you read Civil War battles and it says, you know, there were 2,000 killed and missing, the missing didn't mean most of them ran away. Missing meant there wasn't enough of the body to identify. You know, you get hit with a cannon, you explode like a watermelon, and there's nothing left. You know, pieces of you spread out over yards. And that's what this battlefield was like. So 3 days in this heat, the stench had to be horrible. So about 10 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday morning, Johnson sends a courier across the line under a white flag. And Sherman's thinking, okay, he's finally going to surrender the city. But what the note says is, for God's sakes, let's have a truce so we can tend to the dead and wounded out on this battlefield in front of us. We will send out a burial squad to bury the wounded, or bury the dead, and we will collect the wounded and give them some aid. Now, Sherman was a hard-nosed, very rough commander. And he didn't show much compassion for anybody or anything. If those were Confederates, he would have said no. No, siege is going on. But they were his soldiers that affectionately called him Uncle Billy. So he wrote on the back of the note, there will be a 2-hour ceasefire from noon to 2 p.m. You'll have 2 hours to bury the dead and collect the wounded. 2 p.m. sharp, there will be 1 cannon shot to signal you got 2 minutes to clear the field, and then we start shooting again. So it was in that time frame, from noon to 2 p.m., the Sergeant Poundstone's body was found laying on that field. He was not one of the 66 that made it back. He laid on that field for over 2 days in that heat. He had been shot through the thigh, he was shot in his chest, and the worst wound of all, he was shot through his left eye. The bullet exited above his left ear, blew out about 25% of his skull. And somehow, 2 days later, he's still alive, laying on that field. Sometime during that time, he tore this flag off of the flagstaff. He wadded it up and he stuffed it inside of his tunic. He was trying to hide the flag to keep it from being captured and taken as a trophy of war. The worst thing that could happen, besides being routed, is to have your flag taken as a trophy of war. These bloodstains right here are from the chest wound of Sergeant George Poundstone. That's where it was wadded up. That's his lifeblood right there. After they took him and they discovered the flag, if he had been dead, this flag probably never would have been found. They probably would have just dug a hole and kicked his body and rolled it into it because it was inside his tunic. But because he was taken as a prisoner of war and they tried to help him with his wounds, they found the flag. Both flags of the 53rd were taken that day. We still don't know whatever happened to the national flag. But this flag was taken by the Orphan Brigade, and of course they were proud to capture an enemy's flag. They took the flag and they passed it up and down the lines of their brigade. Not the entire Confederate Army, but just within their brigade. They were passing this flag up and down. Everyone was allowed 1 square inch of the flag. That's what all these missing pieces right here are. We cut off 1 square inch of the flag. So they got to keep those as mementos. And of course, now we have the reminder that the flag was captured. Jacob Laumann, who ordered the charge, I guess when he saw what happened, he just became inconsolable. They say he became a blithering idiot. He was told to take command, and he couldn't take command. General Sherman heard about this charge that he didn't order. He rode his horse as quick as he could over to where the 66 men had come back. And he immediately ordered the arrest of Jacob Laumann. Laumann was arrested and sent back to Iowa, where he was from, and told to wait there until his court-martial. Court-martial never